Hey everybody, welcome back. Got another job today. This happens to be a 2009 Chevy Colorado with a 2.9 liter engine. And the problem this one was having was it would have a rough idle at times, and especially if you pulled out or went to pull out and accelerate just a little bit from off idle up until about half throttle, this thing would really buck around and run rough, sometimes even stall. And so basically, you'd have to run this engine either at idle or wide open throttle. So after testing several things, I won't bore you with the details, but I tested the mass airflow sensor, cleaned it, the map sensor, both oxygen sensors, the variable cam timing solenoid, the cam sensor, camshaft position sensor, crankshaft position sensor, all that stuff. And also done a basic tune-up, spark plugs and all that good stuff. But what I found out was that whenever I could get this thing, once it started running rough, it's kind of like it wouldn't come out of it. So actually what I done was whenever it was running rough, I set the park brake and I would run out here. And I could push, well, of course the manifold's not on it right now, but I would push against the intake manifold and it would pop real loud to the intake manifold. But after that, as long as I held it there, it would run really good. So I noticed the intake manifold seemed to be a little looser than I would expect it to be, because it's plastic. So I expected it to have a little bit of a give to it, but this was way too much. So long story short, I ordered an intake manifold gasket set, and when I started taking this intake manifold out, 3 or 4 of these bolts were just finger tight, like they was backed out by several threads. So here's the intake manifold, but this is not a fun job at all. The way I went about it is I jacked it up, removed the wheel, removed the inner fender, and I could gain access to a couple of bolts down here. It'll help a lot if you pull the there's a factory lifting bracket right here. Remove it and remove the alternator, but and of course the battery. Pull the whole battery and the battery tray out. But now you don't have to completely remove the alternator. With the battery out, I didn't have to worry about shorting anything out, so I just left the wires hooked up and pulled the bolts out of the alternator and just set it back. But other than that, there's several bolts down here that you can't see, and I'm going to show you the manifold. So if you go to do this yourself, you can actually count the bolts and kind of see where things are. Whenever I done this, I was just in the dark. But a good friend to have on this is a 10mm swivel socket. That helps a lot. And I took a 10mm combination wrench, and actually just a cheap one that I didn't care to destroy, and broke it down to a wrench about that short. And other than that, you'll be on top of this engine and under it and all over it, just trying to get these bolts out. But I'll show you, because the biggest problem with this is there is a bracket right here, and that thing, it blocks like every bolt you have to get out, plus it's bolted to the intake manifold. But here's the intake, and you can see this thing's filthy, but you can see where it had just multiple air leaks. But if you I'll back up here a little bit, and you can kind of see the bolts. You got, let me see, of course the one's on the end, and then two, and one in the middle. So hopefully this will help you a little bit. Now this one on the bottom looks like it's an intake manifold bolt, but it's not. It's actually just has a metal insert in it, and that black bracket, that's one of the mounting points for that is through that hole. So there's not this doesn't bolt to the cylinder head, so you can ignore that one. But I'm going to go ahead and clean this manifold up and clean the mating surfaces up on this head, because they are filthy. I will put this back together and I'll give you an update. Alright, a couple hours later, we've got this thing back together. It went together a little bit easier than it came apart, I guess, because, once you actually know where the intake bolts and stuff are at, it makes it a lot easier. But But yeah, before I should have filmed it, but I was in a rush and didn't. But before, the intake would move probably about that much back and forth. I mean, it was just really, really sloppy, and now it's just really solid. But now though, everything it runs really smooth now. Before it was running really rough, but I'll show you. Yeah, as you can see, it's very smooth. Like I say, if I thought and I wasn't in such a hurry, I would have filmed what it was doing before. But there's been a lot of, I've been on the forums and stuff, and I've noticed that there's been people spend up to $1,000, $2,000, and $3,000 I've seen trying to get the notorious 2.9 rough idle to go away. And I've seen people replace mass airflow sensors, map sensors, oxygen sensors, you know, list goes on, even the throttle body. And most likely, what the problem is, for most people anyways, is a leaking intake manifold. Now, you may be able to get by with just tightening the bolts, but I mean, if you're going to go through all the trouble to get access the bolts, you might as well just go ahead and pull the intake manifold off and reseal it. But alrighty, hopefully that helps some people out. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.